Hi, I'm Dave, founder of Halloween Year Round, and as 2024 comes to a close, I'm feeling myself very nostalgic, looking back on the year as a whole. So, as I sit sandwiched between my Everyday's Halloween sign symbolizing the channel and the Christmas tree symbolizing, well, Christmas and the end of the year, I wanted to take a look back on the highs and lows of 2024. So, this is the first in a series of videos that are looking at the best and not worst, but ones I wish I liked more. So it's going to be this whole last week between Christmas and New Year's is going to be filled with videos like this, the first of which is today's video, the top 10 Shudder Originals of 2024. Shudder, as you know, kind of started out as the horror version of Netflix. So they certainly have their competition with things like Tubi and now Screambox, but Shudder was kind of the OG in that space, and I really, really like what they do. They go above and beyond what a normal streaming service does. They know that they're not a big dog like a Netflix or a Hulu or a Prime, but they do the Shudder hotline where you get personalized recommendations from the curator himself, Sam Zimmerman, which I call every year. They do these fun watch parties, and they do all they can to make you, the fan, feel like you're part of the community, and I can't say the same for really any other streaming service. So every year they release a ton of cool original movies and TV shows. So this list today are just my top 10 favorite Shudder original movies. Now let's be clear. I am only counting Shudder originals, not exclusives. It's kind of an arbitrary difference, but I do have to draw the line somewhere, and with the exception of one item on this list, I am only looking at movies and not TV shows. That's just kind of more my thing, and I feel like they do more movies than shows, and it would have been too difficult to do like a top whatever Shudder TV shows, so I'm just including any shows that I think deserve to be recognized on this list. So, without further ado, here are my top 10 favorite Shudder Originals of 2024. Sorry for the bad Kirk impression. Number 10, Doc of Chucky. Anyone who knows anything about me knows that Chucky's the reason I'm a horror fan. What started off as a fear of Chucky as a kid and a My Buddy doll that I had that I thought was going to murder me because I had seen the cover of Child's Play 2 and was terrified of Chucky, eventually turned into a fascination, which eventually led me to becoming the lifelong, die-hard, insane horror fan that I am today. I owe that all to Chucky. In fact, the very first video I ever did for Halloween Year Round when I launched the channel included Chucky. So, a whole deep dive documentary that's like 6 hours long that goes into the in-depths of each movie in the franchise with cast and crew interviews, some new, some old. The interviews, I mean, not the people. I'm all for it. I think that the Shudder documentaries don't get enough attention, and we had that same treatment with Nightmare on Elm Street, we had that same treatment with Friday the 13th, and this was Chucky's time, and I would watch a million hours of people talking about the behind the scenes, and you learn a lot of really interesting things that you never knew. You gain a lot of insights about like, oh, I always thought this was kind of weird that they did this creative choice. Well, they thought it was weird too, and here's the story behind it. I really, really enjoyed this documentary, and I couldn't not mention it on the list just because I love Chucky so much, and I am all for learning more about the behind the scenes of, well, the franchise that it is. Number 9, Azreal. This one had me at Samara Weaving, and then it really had me at post-apocalyptic movie with no dialogue. I love a movie that goes for a challenge, that tries to be something new and different. A couple years ago, a lot of people really hated on Skinamarink. I loved it because of how experimental it was, and while this one definitely has more, shall we say, filmmaking conventions and follows those conventions more, the fact that the whole thing is silent is kind of amazing, and I kept thinking, are they really going to keep this up? Are they really going to keep this up? The answer is, for the most part. But more than that, I think that because there's no dialogue, because we're just relying on body language and facial expressions, it allows the actors to do so much more and kind of flesh their talents, especially Samara Weaving, who I've been a fan of since The Babysitter. And I really love how, because you don't get these like exposition dumps that kind of happen a lot in post-apocalypse, where they feel like they need to explain everything that happened, we kind of just infer it. And it's one of those movies that I feel like there definitely is a backstory that the creators had, but it's up to me to piece it together through multiple views. I've only seen it twice, and I feel like I still need to watch it more times to like fully grasp everything that's going on. And I love that a movie can challenge me to do that. It's something that I don't get very often anymore. Number 8, Infested. So this one makes me feel really itchy and really gets under my skin, no pun intended. I'm definitely not someone that has arachnophobia. My brother does, and I've definitely pranked him with it in the past. But tiny spiders crawling everywhere, there's something icky and visceral about it. And what separates Infested from other spider movies, because this was a year you had another spider movie, Sting, which came out kind of around the same time as Infested. You had the whole, like, 2 movies with similar plots coming out around the same time phenomenon that happens a lot in the film industry. Infested sets itself apart because it could have easily just been like a carbon copy of like 1990s Arachnophobia, but it's like a monster bug movie that kind of has something to say. There's definitely parallels between, sort of pests and how we view different people as unwelcome and how we view different ethnic groups as maybe unwelcome. But it doesn't beat you over the head with it. That's something that I think Black Christmas 2019 failed at, that where it felt like it was preaching to the audience rather than trying to entertain the audience and scare them. Infested is definitely trying to scare the audience, and you could go in and not read that subtext and still walk away and say, that was a really creepy, unsettling spider movie. Especially some of those visuals are, nightmare-inducing. But I love that there's more to it than that. But the movie's not forcing me, it's not spoon-feeding me, it's allowing me to kind of pull those interpretations from it. And again, you don't see very many movies today that trust their audience the way that this one does. Number 7, The Creep Tapes. Remember, I said there'd be one exception. This is that exception. The Creep Tapes is, of course, the anthology sequel spin-off series to Creep and Creep 2, with Mark Duplass as the insane found-footage serial killer that we only know as Peach Fuzz. I'm counting this show because each episode kind of felt like its own mini-movie sequel to Creep, and it kind of worked out beautifully that way. And it's a series that I was already invested and interested in this character, and I would have been fine with just 6 different random spin-off episodes that felt like mini versions of the movies. But those last 2 episodes really take things into a new and interesting direction and really kind of explore this character. It's something that, again, could have been easy to just do the same thing over and over again. And I really, really respect Mark Duplass for not just doing the same thing over and over again and kind of trying to explore his character even more. I thought that was really, really fascinating, and just I dug it. Number 6, Destroy All Neighbors. So we're going way, way back, almost a year, because this one came out in January of 2024. I actually had a really cool, fun interview with the co-writer of this movie. He was really, really cool. We talked about like our inspirations and sort of how like our own worst neighbor stories that inspire us, and come to find that this movie was kind of loosely inspired by a weird neighbor he had. I'll put a link in the description of that interview. It was a lot of fun. He was a really cool guy. Definitely check out his other work. But this was just like a fun, off-the-wall, absurd comedy with just Alex Winters going at it with everything he has, having fun with the role as this weird, kind of vampiric, though not quite. It's never come out and it's never said explicitly, but you kind of infer it. His name's Vlad. As this weird neighbor that makes you look like the jerk. And it's something that we all have a crazy neighbor story, and this movie kind of just takes that and runs with it to extreme horror comedy territory. It's really funny. It's really entertaining. I wasn't a fan of prog rock before I saw this movie, but it definitely inspired me to go check out that genre of music. So it's got that going for it too. Number 5, stop motion. The fact that this movie is a feature debut for writer-director Robert Morgan is nothing short of amazing. This is a guy who specialized in stop-motion short films, and then he takes those skills and puts them in a movie that's about the animator, herself, and kind of gives us a window into the mind of the creative and the obsession that can come with it, the generational trauma and guilt that can come with it, and just delivers a really creepy movie that masterfully blends live action with the stop-motion animation in sequences that are genuinely disturbing and get under your skin. It's not the kind of movie that jumps out and scares you, but it's one that I was still thinking about weeks after I saw it. The stop-motion scenes are on point, and if anything other than creeping you out, it kind of gives you massive respect for the field and the amount of time and energy and dedication that people who do stop motion have to go through. Number 4, VHS Beyond. There were definitely mixed feelings about Shudder kind of redoing, or not redoing, rebooting this franchise almost, or at least continuing it on. For years we had just 3 VHS movies, and Shudder's kind of made it an annual thing to release a movie every year. We've gone back to the 80s, we've gone to the 90s. We've explored all types of time periods with VHS, and I love that this one doesn't set itself apart in terms of decade or year or era, but in terms of subgenre, that we're going full extraterrestrial sci-fi horror. Again, everything's hit or miss, but there's more hits in this one than there are misses, I think, in some of the other years. I really dug the Stork one. It was really intense. It made you feel like you were right there in the action, and I think with the whole just with the use of body cams for the police, it was an interesting way to incorporate the found footage aspect in a way that felt realistic and grounded and didn't make you always question, why are they still holding the camera? And don't get me started on Fur Babies, the one that Justin Long co-directed and co-wrote. It is probably one of the most disturbing segments in the entire VHS franchise. It's one that stuck with me, and not even because it goes into great sci-fi horror territory, but it's just weird and creepy and unsettling with just what people do to each other. Plus, it has to be said, and again, not to get too current topic or political, all this stuff about these weird drones in the sky lately, I don't know if you've been following the news, but I'm from the Philadelphia area, and there's a lot of talk of them over Jersey and even some in Pennsylvania. Some of these segments about lights in the sky, this movie's hitting close to home right now, and it's in a way that's really kind of freaking me out, so talking about it on this channel is my way of coping with it. Number 3, In a Violent Nature. Much like with Azreal, In a Violent Nature is one that I would call experimental. You guys know the shtick. The whole movie is from the perspective of the Jason Voorhees-esque slasher. It's long at times, it's tedious at times, but that's kind of the point. He's just kind of walking through the woods for a while. He's grabbing his weapon, he's doing this, he's doing his prep work. But that's the point, where we're seeing this window into what it's like for the killer. And I love subversions of expectations. Yes, the pretzel kill is amazing, but what really gets me about this movie is the way it creates its own mythos. We hear these little snippets of massacres that he did here and there, as if the movie is creating its own franchise, and as if this movie we're watching right now, In a Violent Nature, who knows what number it is. It might be the 3rd movie in the series. It might be the 4th movie in the series, because there's references to other things. And I love that, again, it trusts the audience to just jump right in. And yes, I mean, the pretzel kill, probably, if it weren't for Terrifier 3 this year, that would probably be the most gruesome, disgusting, memorable horror movie kill of the entire year. Number 2, Odity. When I rank these, I kind of look at, like, you know, do I like this one better versus this one better versus this one? And any time I pitted these movies against Odity, Odity won out. Well, except for my number 1 pick, which we'll get to. And it's not even for, like, all these other movies I can kind of point to, oh, well, this movie does this really well, and this movie does this unique thing, and this movie is experimental because of this. Oddity earns its second place on this list simply because it is so effective, and it is so genuinely frightening and terrifying. The way that it builds suspense, the way that it puts you in there, the way that it uses a really creepy image of this, like, you know, golem-like character, figure thing, statue, whatever you want to call it. It's the stuff of nightmares, and it's the example of a movie that is extremely well made, but, like, doesn't do anything insane or crazy to set itself apart, but winds up setting itself apart because it is that good, and it is that genuinely scary. From the very first scene where, you know, the guy comes to the door, and we're feeling the sense of dread, like, don't open the door, and it never lets up. It's one that, again, I'm a huge horror fan, I'm pretty desensitized, but this one got to me, and the fact that it did is no easy feat. The fact that this movie gave me anxiety, and that is really, really hard to do. It's creepy, it's effective, it has interesting characters and a mystery that you kind of unravel. And again, not to get too into spoilers, but I love it when you have... It's very cliche where, like, the supernatural element is the evil. And I love that in this movie, that's not always necessarily true. And that's all I'll say about that. If you haven't seen it, you're definitely going to want to check this one out. And finally, number 1, Late Night with the Devil. I was so glad that for some of these, especially this one, Shudder's been releasing them in theaters first before putting them on their service, because this movie was amazing to watch with a packed crowd at the Regal King of Prussia. It's just, I love, first of all, I'm a huge talk show fan, you know, I love Conan O'Brien, David Letterman, you go back further, Johnny Carson, and this captures that era of, like, TV history. And I love how it takes something like demonic possession that is often kept in, like, the fringes of society, in dark, hidden away corners, and it's like, we're going to put it front and center, live on TV, where you kind of can't hide behind that stuff, and it feeds off the energy of the audience. It's one of my favorite movies of the year overall, not just Shudder Originals. You've got an amazing lead performance by David Dastmalchian, who has always killed it in supporting roles, and this movie shows he's a leading man, and he always has been, and he needs to get more roles like this. Plus, the creepy girl who's possessed is named Lily. That's also my daughter's name, so that kind of, you know, made me worried about certain things. But this is just a movie that it oozes its time period, and I love that it almost tricks you into thinking it could have been made then, even down to the special effects, which look dated, but that's the point. I mean, let's not overlook the fact that it's also reeling with Halloween imagery. It's set on Halloween night, and it's kind of a perfect movie to watch on Halloween. And there's not that many movies like that, unfortunately. Even movies that are kind of set around Halloween, they don't really go for it the way that this movie does. So like I said, it's not only my favorite Shudder original of the year, it's one of my favorite horror movies of the year overall. If you're a fan of late night television, if you're a fan of, like, just TV history, or just, you know, possession movies that try to do something unique or different, Late Night with the Devil is where it's at. So obviously all of these movies and one TV show are streaming on Shudder if you want to check them out. This is just my top 10 list. These are just my picks. This is just my rant. I would love to know what yours are. What were some of your favorite Shudder original movies or TV shows? Let me know in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. If you don't, you may end up trapped in any one of these movies, and I don't think you'd want to be trapped in any of them. And as always, every day is Halloween.